Thanks to SimpliSafe for sponsoring this video. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Silicon Valley is no stranger to a lot of goofy insider terminology for what are really some pretty basic concepts. Move fast and break things, building in public, minimum viable personality, vibe coding, 10x, AI native, cloud native, crypto native, post-scarcity, post-abundance, post-nut, pre-revenue, pre-idea, Uber for agentic software as a service with taste and trust as a moat, is all more or less the same way of saying, we are out of capital runway and we need another funding round. Now, as fun as it is to joke about all of this, the reality is that most of the people actually inside this industry are aware of how silly this all really sounds. And as a former finance bro, I can't exactly throw too many stones in the glass house of dumb buzzwords. But there is one new buzzy phrase that is generally being taken a lot more seriously, and is also a lot less funny.
How do you think you can escape the permanent underclass?
Fear of being stuck in the permanent underclass.
And you and I will get left in the AI underclass forever.
Escaping the permanent underclass has become a warning that your value as a human being is on a strict depreciation schedule, and that these next few years may be the last opportunity we have left before society is forever split between the people who own enough assets to support themselves independently in a fully automated utopia, and everybody else who has no further value, at least as far as the market is concerned, because their labor has been entirely undercut by machines. It's pretty grim stuff, and putting aside the small little technicality that this is the future they are working hard to create, this idea is being taken seriously enough that it's worth understanding why. Why does Silicon Valley think they are going to create a permanent underclass? What steps are they taking to make sure they are on the right side of the widening demographic gap? And why are they treating this like it's an inevitability?
It's hard to say exactly what that moment is, but there will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job for sort of personal satisfaction, but the AI will be able to do everything.
AI is the biggest technical thing ever in my lifetime. I mean, it is so profound, and therefore its influence is hard to overstate.
You graduated?
I was told by a lot of people that I was gonna get a job right out of college, and then all of a sudden, there's no jobs.
Okay, so like most of the best Silicon Valley creations, this permanent underclass started out as a, well, let's call it a joke that ended up being taken a bit too seriously, and ultimately just put a Silicon Valley spin on an idea that already existed. And that idea is social mobility, or in plain English, how easy it is for a poor person within an economy to become wealthy if they work hard, make smart decisions, and don't waste their money. The other side of the same equation is how easy it is for a wealthy person to end up poor if they make bad decisions, don't work hard, and do waste their money. But that part is generally left out. Anyway, the point is, if moving up and or down between economic classes is really easy, your country has good social mobility. Even the term underclass is not new. It comes from the 1960s when an economist, Gunnar Myrdal, used it to describe people who were long-term unemployed, underemployed, or outright unemployable to the point where they were cut off from general society. This was primarily in reference to communities that had gone through rapid deindustrialization. So when tech bros say these are the last years to escape the permanent underclass, what they are really saying is that social mobility is about to get so bad that if you are not financially independent before the machines take your job, you are going to be in this underclass forever with no way to escape. Again, this idea is most popular amongst tech workers who are in many cases the people building this future, which we will get to. But first, there are really three reasons why this way of thinking has taken off. The first is that even without widespread AI adoption, it's kind of already happening. In 1940, roughly 90% of American children earned more than their parents did at the same age. By the time millennials entered the workforce, that number had fallen to just 50%. According to a study from economist Raj Shetty and his team at Harvard's Opportunity Insights. Productivity, GDP, corporate profits, all of that kept going up. The gains just stopped being distributed the way they used to be. The mechanisms behind this are not exactly a mystery. Union membership, which once covered about a third of American workers, has fallen to around 10% according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The median home price in America is now roughly 5 times the median household income, according to Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies. Between 2019 and 2024 alone, home prices rose 48%, while household incomes rose just 22%, according to data from the Fed. So the single most common wealth-building tool available to most Americans, owning a home, is increasingly out of reach for the people who need it most. Education, which was supposed to be the other ladder, has risen 312% in inflation-adjusted terms since 1963, according to the Education Data Initiative. The average federal student loan balance per borrower is now $39,633 according to the Department of Education, which means the very tool that was supposed to help people climb the income ladder now starts them off in a financial hole that takes years to dig out of. And all of these trends had been true well before LLMs became as mainstream as they are today, leading to the reasonable fear that widespread automation is only going to make an existing trend significantly worse. According to a report by McKinsey & Company, over a third of someone's lifetime realizable wealth is tied up in their human capital. Which is just a very clinical finance bro way of saying that unless you are already very independently wealthy, your greatest asset is all of the future hours of your lifetime you can trade in exchange for money. Sure, you can reinvest those earnings, or make those hours more valuable by acquiring marketable training, but your financial foundation is still tied up in being able to sell that time. The problem is that if a viable competitor enters the market for hours of human work, natural market forces dictate that those hours will simply be less valuable. This is especially bad for young people who statistically have more future hours to sell and have had less time to build up alternative sources of cash flows. Now, all of this is clearly pretty grim, but to a lot of people, the solution is to just make sure that they have enough saved and invested as early as possible to ensure that they can afford to keep living their desired lifestyle before the value of their hours is undercut. As far as this point goes, it's really just the financial independence movement with a dystopian cyberpunk spin on it. And look, individually, these people might actually have a point. Recent historical trends have overwhelmingly favored existing asset owners over workers, and new technology is only pushing this further in that direction. But it's also worth asking why this way of thinking is so popular with the very same people working to actually make that technology. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why the people closest to building the future are the most desperate to escape it. This video is sponsored by SimpliSafe. There's no safe like SimpliSafe, the system I have been using to lock down my new studio I am setting up in Los Angeles for a brand new channel I've been working on. More on that soon. That studio is going to be full of expensive cameras, lenses, and computers. And if you have spent any time in LA, you already know exactly why I do not want to walk in one morning to find any of that gone. I needed something I could install myself, monitor from my phone, and not get locked into a long contract for. SimpliSafe runs the opposite direction from most home security in this country. You order it online, set it up yourself in an afternoon, and you are paying around $1 a day for professional monitoring that actually responds when something is wrong. No long-term contracts, no hidden fees, no big company nonsense. It's also renter-friendly, no drilling required for most of the indoor sensors, so when the studio moves, the whole setup moves with me. The thing I actually use most is the app. You arm and disarm from your phone, pull up the camera feeds when somebody is at the door, and check on the place when you are out of town. SimpliSafe is offering How Money Works viewers 50% off the system, and your first month of professional monitoring is free when you sign up for a plan. If you do not love it, you have 60 days to send it back for a full refund. Visit simplisafe.com/howmoneyworks to customize yours. Thanks to SimpliSafe for sponsoring this video. Okay, so there's a very good reason why this idea has become so popular in Silicon Valley specifically. And that's because even before modern generative AI presented itself as such a threat to the ladder of social mobility, Silicon Valley was kind of already where people went to escape the permanent underclass. Social mobility is not the same everywhere in America. Depending on where you grow up, your chances of moving from poor to wealthy can vary by a factor of 3. Raj Shetty's Opportunity Atlas, which maps economic mobility across every neighborhood in America, found that San Jose, the heart of Silicon Valley, has one of the highest rates of upward mobility of any metro area in the country. A child born in the bottom fifth of the income distribution in San Jose has a 12.9% chance of reaching the top fifth by the age of 30. In Charlotte, North Carolina, that number is just 4.4%. Additionally, for what it's worth, the top fifth of income earners in San Jose are also on average taking home a lot more. So Silicon Valley is already seen as one of the last places where the economic ladder still kind of works, which makes the people living there, or more likely moving there, especially receptive to the idea that time for up or out is coming to an end. For a long time, this was the place where smart people could come and earn truly life-changing amounts of money, even if they didn't come from a wealthy background. Tech was arguably even more meritocratic than finance or big law or medicine, which all had their own gatekeeping mechanisms that favored people from the right schools or the right families. And a lot of the people who moved here had a similar plan. Work hard, save aggressively, vest some shares, and get out before you burn out. Now, I know this is a generalization, and things have changed recently, but for a long time, tech in particular also promoted a less ostentatious lifestyle than a similar high-end career in finance or law. People were earning genuinely ridiculous money in the Valley and still wearing company hoodies while primarily getting their entertainment from going on hikes and playing video games. Instead of buying ludicrously expensive housing, the culture of Silicon Valley workers was more pared back and focused on just watching number go up in their vesting and brokerage accounts. I know it's anecdotal, and I personally didn't work in tech, but when I lived and worked in San Francisco, I had 3 roommates who did work in tech and were all making more than enough money to live an extremely comfortable lifestyle anywhere else in the world. But the housing situation and the save everything you can culture in the area meant that we were all living between 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and this kind of arrangement was considered completely normal. Someone spending all of their money to live in the Valley, even if they could comfortably afford it, would be genuinely unusual. Again, at least in my own experience. They were doing this because most of them had a plan to make money and get out. Financial independence was already really popular amongst tech workers. The idea being, save enough, invest everything, build a portfolio large enough that you can live off the returns permanently, and then go do whatever you actually want to do with your life. The math behind it is pretty simple. A study from the 1990s found that if you withdraw about 4% of a diversified portfolio each year, it should last you indefinitely. So if your annual expenses are $100,000, you need $2.5 million invested. At $200,000 a year, you need $5 million. The target is 25 times your annual spending. Now, for most Americans, saving $2.5 million is a fantasy. The median household income is around $80,000. After taxes, housing, food, transportation, and the average $39,633 in student loan debt, there's not a lot left over. But for a senior software engineer in San Jose making $400,000 a year at a company that also gives them restricted stock units that have been appreciating at 30% annually, it was clearly possible. And for a lot of people who came from humble backgrounds, it really was just one of the last escape hatches left to financial security. Even for the people that didn't want to go and retire on a ranch in Colorado at the age of 35, a lot of tech working culture is still built around getting experience and saving up what is charmingly known as you money. The idea is that once you have this, you can leave the big companies and go work for a startup or start your own business, without being destitute in the very likely scenario that it doesn't work out. So yeah, already before the whole AI fear and/or hype cycle came around, tech bros were already fully on board with the idea of jumping social classes. Additionally, this idea of living off your investment to either live a good life or double down into a startup feeds in really naturally to the third reason why tech bros have become so obsessed with this idea. It's just really good marketing. Sam Altman has said publicly that AI will create the first one-person billion-dollar company. He even reportedly has a betting pool with his CEO friends about what year it will happen. Now, of course, we all know that Sam Altman would never say something just to hype up his own products. But if this is possible, it is probably going to happen in the tech sector where valuations are, well, generous. And a single person isn't going to be constrained by their physical limitations to produce tangible goods and services. Now, in response to statements like this, people working in this field either don't believe their own hype, in which case they might want to make as much money as they can before the bubble implodes, or if they do believe this narrative, then they think that business equity is about to become a lot more valuable. And this is the perfect time to be going out alone, of which the first step is gaining some level of financial independence. No matter which way you interpret the leaders in this space, they are basically just saying, don't be poor or get rich and die trying, depending on what take you prefer. Either way, the nerdy tech bros that we have grown up with are kind of going through something. The culture in Silicon Valley has noticeably changed over recent years to become far more serious. It's gone from beanbag chairs and salad bars to 80-hour weeks, biohacking, and token maxing with a sprinkle of 10x productivity, whatever that means. The threat of being stuck in the permanent underclass, especially in a time of sweeping layoffs, is just a great narrative to keep tech workers on their hashtag grindset. So far in 2026, over 108,000 tech workers have been laid off. That is on top of roughly 122,000 in 2025 and 150,000 in 2024. Companies are naturally framing many of these cuts as AI-related restructuring. But Deutsche Bank analysts wrote in January that AI redundancy washing will be a significant feature in 2026, which is a polite way of saying that a lot of companies are just using AI as an excuse to fire people they already wanted to get rid of, because it sounds better in investor letters than, "We massively overhired post-pandemic and are now spending too much on CapEx." Entry-level tech job postings specifically have dropped 50% at major tech companies compared to pre-pandemic levels. And hiring of new graduates by the 15 largest tech firms has fallen by more than half according to an analysis by the SF Standard. If your employees genuinely believe that the window for financial security is closing, they are going to work harder, demand less, and be less likely to push back on that optional weekend deployment. Now, I know this isn't exactly shocking to anybody that's been watching Silicon Valley for the past 3 years, and it's certainly not surprising to people actually on the inside. But again, the logical response to this is using the time that they do have to make sure that they can escape the permanent underclass before they get smited off the last ladder up. Outwardly, it's also clearly a marketing spin to make their companies look all-powerful. Who wouldn't want to invest in the company that's going to define permanent haves and have-nots, right? If these companies promote the idea that their technology is going to reshape the social fabric like the steam engine did during the Industrial Revolution, it goes a long way to rationalize their extreme investments into this technology, especially as the industry lines up to take 2.5 AI companies through particularly public initial public offerings this year. And of course, it's worth pointing out that if these listings go well, the tech workers themselves will probably have everything they need to escape the underclass for good, so there is something of a perverse incentive to play along. And well, yeah, this is objectively the most sensible course of action for these people to be taking individually. But it's still really hard to ignore the irony of escaping the permanent underclass by riding the investment returns of creating that underclass in the first place. It sounds dumb, but it's also not anything new. And if you don't believe me, go and watch this next video to find out why tech bros in particular seem to never learn any of the lessons from the works of fiction they hold so dear. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.